Nobody ever asked Bea Calloway her real name. He called her Bea because she was always buzzing around, always moving, always doing something that needed to be done before anyone else noticed it needed doing. But her name, her full name, Beatrice Calloway, was written on exactly one document inside the Voss estate, her employment contract, filed somewhere in a drawer that nobody opened. She was 26 years old, 5'4", and 263 pounds on the morning she drove her 2009 Honda Civic through the iron gates of the Voss property for the first time. She had a thermos of gas station coffee between her knees and exactly $47 in her checking account. The job paid $18 an hour. She had done the math 3 times on the drive over. The estate sat 12 miles outside of Portland at the end of a private road that didn't show up on Google Maps. Someone had gone out of their way to keep it off the grid. The house itself was the kind of house that made you feel like you had mispronounced something your whole life. 3 stories of pale stone, ivy climbing the east wing, a fountain in the circular drive that ran even in December. Bea had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner in Gresham. She had shared that bedroom with her younger sister until she was 19. She parked her Civic between a black Mercedes and a black Escalade and sat for a moment before getting out. She was a housekeeper. She had been a housekeeper for 4 years, working through an agency that placed domestic staff in high-end homes across the Portland metro area. She was good at it, not in the way people are good at things they love. She wasn't sure she loved it, but in the way that some people are simply competent, reliably, quietly, without needing to be told twice. She showed up on time. She didn't break things, didn't ask questions about what she found in rooms she was cleaning. The Voss estate was different from her other placements. She knew that before she even walked through the door. The agency coordinator had called her personally, which didn't happen. Coordinators sent emails. This time, a woman named Cheryl had called her on her cell phone at 7 in the morning and said, very carefully, "Bea, this client requires discretion above the usual standard. Do you understand what I mean by that?" Bea had said yes. She had understood perfectly. The Voss family was not a family you read about in the newspaper. They were a family you heard about in the spaces between sentences, in the way people lowered their voices when a certain name came up, in the way certain contractors around Portland would take jobs from them without asking for details, and would cash the checks without asking for explanations. Name, Voss, was attached to 3 legitimate businesses: a logistics company, a property management firm, and a restaurant group. It was attached to other things too, things that moved differently, things that didn't have a storefront. Roman Voss was 41 years old. He had taken over from his father at 33, after the old man had a stroke that left him unable to speak. He was known, to the people who knew him, as someone who ran things cleanly. No unnecessary violence, no exposure. The business moved, the money moved, and nothing traced back to the house at the end of the private road. Bea learned all of this not from research. She had specifically not researched, but from the other staff, gradually, in the way information seeps through walls in a house where people are careful about everything except what they say to the housekeeper. He had been working at the estate for 6 weeks when she first encountered Miriam Voss. His mother lived in the East Wing. She was 74, small, white-haired, and moved through the house with a particular quality of stillness that Bea had learned to recognize. Miriam had dementia. Not the severe, late-stage kind, not yet, but the kind that came and went like weather, that left her lucid and sharp on some mornings and completely lost on others. The family did not discuss it openly. There was a private nurse, a woman named Holt, who worked the overnight shift, and there were instructions left in the staff kitchen about what Miriam could and could not do alone. What the instructions did not cover was what happened when Miriam wandered. The first time it happened, Bea was on her hands and knees scrubbing the grout in the west hallway bathroom at 10:30 in the morning when she heard footsteps, small, slow, deliberate. coming down the corridor. She stood up and looked out the door. Miriam was walking toward the back of the house in her nightgown, holding a small framed photograph against her chest, speaking quietly to it in what sounded like German. Bea did not call for anyone. She stepped into the hallway. "Voss," she said, keeping her voice low and easy. "Where are you headed?" Miriam stopped and looked at her with complete calm. "I'm going to meet my husband at the station," she said. "He's coming in on the 4 o'clock. Miriam's husband had been dead for 9 years. The 4 o'clock from where, Bea didn't know. "It's a bit of a walk," Bea said. "Are you hungry? I was about to make tea." It was not a question designed to trick her. It was just a question offered the way you offer something to anyone who looks like they might need a place to stop moving for a minute. Miriam considered it with the seriousness as of someone making a real decision. Then she nodded and followed Bea to the kitchen, and they sat together at the small table near the window, and Bea made tea and found a package of shortbread cookies in the pantry, and Miriam told her about a dress she'd worn to a dance in 1972, while Bea listened and didn't pretend it wasn't happening. After that, they had a kind of understanding. Not spoken, not formal. But when Miriam wandered, she wandered toward wherever Bea was working, and Bea would stop what she was doing and be present, and they would talk or sit quietly, and eventually Miriam would find her way back to herself or back to sleep. None of the other staff did this. Not because they were unkind. Most of them weren't, but because none of them had the patience for it, or the stillness, or the willingness to simply sit with someone in the middle of confusion without trying to fix it. Bea had grown up with a grandmother who got lost in time in her final years. She knew what it looked like to need someone to just stay. Roman Voss did not know about any of this, or if he did, he had not shown it. And he had seen him in passing, twice in the hallway, once through a window as he crossed the drive. He was tall, dark-haired, going grey at the temples, with the kind of face that gave nothing away. He had nodded at her once in the hallway. She had nodded back. That was the full extent of their relationship. And until the night of the dinner. And the Voss estate hosted events occasionally, private, invitation-only affairs, that the staff was briefed on 48 hours in advance and debriefed on the morning after, when the coordinator would remind everyone what they had and had not seen. The event in the 3rd week of January was described internally as a business dinner. 40 guests, black tie, full catering staff plus the regular household help. Miller was assigned to the receiving rooms on the ground floor. Her job was to circulate with drinks, keep surfaces cleared, and make sure the east corridor, which led to the private family rooms, stayed closed. Nian. The woman who arrived with the Ferrante family did not introduce herself as anyone's anything at first. She was in her mid-30s, thin, dark-eyed, wearing a dress that had cost more than 3 months of Bea's salary. Her name, Bea learned later, was Celia Ferrante. She was the daughter of Aldo Ferrante, who ran a competing operation out of Seattle and had come to Portland ostensibly to discuss a business arrangement. What Celia had come to discuss was less clear. What became clear over the course of the evening was that Celia was performing. Every movement was calibrated. Every laugh landed at the right moment. She touched Roman's arm twice during the cocktail hour, brief and light, in the way of someone making a claim without making a scene. She watched Bea carry a tray past and said something to the woman beside her that made them both smile in the direction Bea had just come from. Bea had heard worse. She kept moving. The incident happened at 10:47. Bea knew the time because she had just checked her phone in the kitchen, 48 minutes left on her shift, when she noticed that the east corridor door was open. Not all the way. A crack. Enough to see that the light at the far end was on. Set down her tray and walked toward it. The hallway to the east wing was supposed to be empty. The family rooms were off-limits to guests. Holt had texted at 9 to say Miriam had gone to bed without trouble and she would check in again at midnight. But the light was on at the far end of the hall, and when Bea pushed through the door and walked the length of the corridor, She found Miriam standing in the small sitting room that adjoined her bedroom, wearing her good wool coat over her nightgown, holding her purse. "I have to go," Miriam said when she saw Bea. Her voice was clear but thin, the way it got when she was caught between what was real and what wasn't. "He's waiting for me." "No," Bea said. "Let me come with you." She was crossing the room, moving toward Miriam, when she heard the voice behind her. What is this?" Bea Ferrante was standing in the doorway of the sitting room. She had followed Bea down the hallway, or had been heading here herself. Bea couldn't tell, and she was looking at Miriam with an expression that Bea could not fully read, but did not like. "A private area," Bea said, turning. "Guests aren't permitted." "Yeah, I'm a colleague guest," Celia said. "And this woman—" She gestured at Miriam with 2 fingers, the kind of gesture you'd use to indicate a piece of furniture should not be wandering around unsupervised. It reflects poorly. Miriam looked at Celia. Something shifted in her face. The specific, animal clarity that sometimes broke through in moments like this, the part of her that still knew when she was being talked about, like she wasn't in the room. "Know who you are," Miriam said. Out quiet and certain, Celia went still. "You're the Ferrante girl," Miriam said. "Aldo's daughter. I knew your mother before she stopped speaking to me." She paused. "She stopped speaking to me because she found out what your father does with money that isn't his." The room held the sentence like a held breath. Celia's expression moved through something, surprise, calculation, and then something harder. She stepped toward Miriam with one arm rising, her palm open and flat, moving with the speed of someone who has decided not to decide. Bea moved faster. He stepped between them without thinking. Her back was to Celia, and her arms were around Miriam, and she was turning them both, pulling Miriam against her, so that when Celia's hand came down, it caught Bea across the left shoulder and the side of her neck. Open palm, not nothing, sharp enough to sting. The room went silent. Bea held Miriam. She did not let go. She could feel the older woman's heartbeat against her own chest, fast and frightened, and she pressed her hand flat against Miriam's back and said quietly, directly into her hair, "It's okay. I've got you. We're okay." Behind her, she heard the sound of someone else arriving. Turned slowly, keeping Miriam tucked against her side. The Roman Voss was standing in the doorway. He was in his dinner jacket, no tie, one hand still on the doorframe. His eyes moved from Celia to Bea to his mother, and then back to Celia, and they stayed there. "Roman," Celia said. Her voice had recovered. The performance was back. "I came to find you and I got turned around in the corridor. Your mother was?" "What happened?" Roman said. The voice was level and completely empty, the kind of empty that wasn't calm. It was the thing that comes after calm, when calm has been set aside, because it's no longer the appropriate tool. Looked at Bea. "Is she hurt?" "No," Bea said. "She's frightened. She needs to sit down." "Nyun." Roman nodded once and stepped aside from the door. "Can you stay with her for a moment?" "Yes," Bea said. Looked back at Celia. "Come with me." Celia moved to follow him. At the door she paused and looked back at Bea. A long look, the kind that was meant to feel like a warning. And then she was gone, and Bea sat down on the small settee and eased Miriam down beside her, and they sat together in the quiet of the east wing, while the sounds of the dinner party continued, faintly, at the other end of the house. Till Miriam's breathing slowed. "That woman has a hard face," she said eventually. "Does," Bea agreed. "You have a soft one." Miriam looked up at her with the particular directness she had in the clear moments. "My son should know what you did." "He saw," Bea said. "Isn't knowing," Miriam said. And then she closed her eyes, and Bea sat with her, and the minutes moved quietly past. "Law, what happened in the hallway between Roman Voss and Celia Ferrante, what was said, what was decided?" Bea did not witness directly. What she knew was assembled from the things that became visible over the following days, the way you understand a fire from what it leaves behind. Ferrante party left the estate that night before midnight, 2 hours ahead of schedule. Aldo Ferrante was escorted to his car by 2 of Roman's people, not rudely but firmly. Celia did not say goodbye to anyone. The business arrangement that had brought them to Portland was, according to the staff coordinator's careful morning briefing, no longer being pursued. 3 days later, Bea arrived at work to find a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter with her name on it. Inside was a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. Controlled, left-leaning, economical. You were kind to her. You have been kind to her more than once. I should have said something sooner. Thank you. There was no signature. She didn't need one. The following Monday, Roman Voss stopped in the doorway of the library, where Bea was dusting the upper shelves on a rolling ladder that was slightly too short for the job. You know you're supposed to use the tall one, he said. It's in the supply closet. No, she said. This one's faster to set up. Looked at her for a moment, and something about the look was not what she expected, not assessment, not the distant acknowledgement of an employer. It was more like recognition, like he was seeing something he'd been looking at for a while and had only just named. My mother talks about you, he said. Bea came down 1 rung on the ladder. She talks about a lot of things. Talks about you specifically. She says you sit with her when she gets lost. Inga didn't answer immediately. The thing about what she did for Miriam was that she had never thought of it as something worth discussing. It was just what you did when someone was confused and alone, and needed someone to be there. You were there? Doesn't need much, Bea said finally. Just company. No. What she needs, Roman said. There was something brief and unguarded in his voice. Just for a moment, the kind of thing you miss if you're not paying attention. I don't always have time to give it. Bea looked at him. Nobody's blaming you. Yes, I'm blaming me. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when 2 people are both being honest at the same time, and neither of them has to perform about it. The woman, Roman said. Celia Ferrante, she didn't. I'm fine, Bea said. It's not what I was going to ask. Yeah, she waited. You frightened, he said, of repercussions, from her or from her father. Bea thought about it honestly. I'm more scared of losing this job than of anything the Ferrante family might do, she said. Something moved across his face. You're not losing this job. Okay, she said. I mean it. And I believe you, she said. Nodded. He started to leave, then stopped. Beatrice, he said. She startled slightly at her full name. She had not known he knew it. What you did for her, it wasn't nothing. Didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure she was supposed to say anything. He left. She climbed back up the ladder and finished the shelf. Miriam asked her, the following Thursday over tea, whether she had ever been in love. Bea said, briefly, it didn't go anywhere. Most things don't, Miriam said. She turned her teacup in small circles on the saucer. Roman's been alone a long time, since before his father got sick. He's the kind of man who takes care of everyone and lets no one take care of him. It makes him lonely in a way he doesn't recognize. Bea was quiet. I'm not telling you what to do, Miriam said. I'm just telling you what I see. I see quite a lot, even when it seems like I don't. Bea looked at the old woman across the kitchen table, at her white hair and her careful hands and her eyes that were, in this moment, completely present. No, you do, Bea said. Miriam smiled. It was a real one, the kind that involved the whole face. You should wear your hair down, she said. It's prettier that way. Bea laughed. She couldn't help it. It came out surprised and genuine, the laugh of someone who hadn't expected to. Miriam looked pleased with herself and ate another cookie. It was not a love story that announced itself. Nothing about it was loud or sudden or cinematic. It was quieter than that. It moved the way real things move, slowly, through proximity and repetition and small moments of honesty that accumulate until you look up one day and realize the landscape has changed, without your having noticed. Over the following weeks, Roman Voss began appearing in rooms where Bea was working. Not intrusively, he was not a man who hovered, but he was there in a way he hadn't been before. He asked her questions that had nothing to do with housekeeping. He had a dry, understated humor that surfaced in unexpected moments and disappeared quickly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to use it. He listened when she spoke in a way that most people didn't, fully, without the visible impatience of someone waiting for their turn. Told him once, without meaning to, about her grandmother. About what it had been like at the end, when her grandmother couldn't remember her name, but still recognized her voice. About sitting beside her bed for hours listening to her talk about people who had been dead for 40 years. Roman was quiet for a long time after that. "He was lucky to have you," he said. "Yeah, I was lucky to have her," Bea said. "She taught me that being present is the most valuable thing you can offer anyone. It sounds simple, it isn't." He looked at her. "No," he said, "it isn't." The night that Aldo Ferrante tried to move on the Voss logistics operation, the night that 3 of Roman's warehouses received simultaneous visits from people who were not there for legitimate business, was the night that Bea stayed late because Miriam had had a difficult afternoon and no one had been able to reach Holt. He was in the kitchen making soup when Roman came in at 2 in the morning with his jacket gone and his sleeves rolled up, and the particular kind of controlled quiet around him that she had learned meant something serious had happened, and he was processing it in the way he processed everything, inward, without display. And he saw her at the stove and stopped. "He had a hard day," Bea said without turning around. "She's sleeping now. I didn't want to leave until she settled." He sat down at the kitchen table without saying anything. It brought him a bowl of soup and sat down across from him. He looked at it. He looked at her. He picked up the spoon. Sat together. In the kitchen at 2 in the morning, while the house was quiet around them. She didn't ask him what had happened. He didn't tell her. They were just 2 people in a kitchen, in the middle of the night, eating soup. And after a while he said, "I don't know how you do it." "Do what?" "You make things feel manageable." Thought about that. "I don't make them manageable," she said. "I just stay in the room. That's all I do. The room feels different with someone in it." Down his spoon and looked at her across the table, and in the kitchen light at 2 in the morning, he looked like what he actually was, a man who carried a great deal and put most of it down alone every night and got up and picked it up again. "Beatrice," he said. She said, "Nobody calls me Beatrice." "Do," he said. He held his gaze. "Okay," she said quietly. Yeah, it was not a declaration. It wasn't a moment from a movie. It was just 2 people telling the truth across a kitchen table, with soup going cold between them, while a woman with dementia slept peacefully at the other end of the house. It was real. That was the thing about it. It was entirely, completely, unmistakably real, and after a life of so much that wasn't, that counted for everything. Thinking about that moment in the East Wing, Bea, standing between Celia's raised hand and an old woman who didn't even fully know where she was. Nobody asked her to do it. Nobody would have blamed her for looking the other way. She was a housekeeper. It was not her job, not her family, not her fight. And yet she moved. So, that's the thing I can't stop turning over. The move happened before the thought did. And I think that's what real character looks like. Not the decision you make when you have time to weigh your options, Jill, but the one your body makes before your brain catches up. Bea didn't step in front of Celia because she calculated the risk and decided it was worth it. She stepped in because somewhere along the way, decency had become so deeply part of who she was that it operated on instinct. She had been practicing it her whole life without calling it that. Sitting with her grandmother through the confusion, making tea for Miriam on the mornings Miriam thought her husband was still alive. Staying late, because no one else did. None of those things were dramatic. None of them were witnessed. They were just the daily, unglamorous work of being a person who shows up, Not for the recognition, but because someone needed someone, and she was there. I think about the kind of intelligence that requires. Not book intelligence, something quieter than that, and harder to teach. The ability to read a room, to understand what a person actually needs versus what they're asking for. Know that Miriam didn't need to be corrected. When she talked about her husband at the station, she needed to be met where she was. That kind of awareness is its own form of wisdom. Bea had it in abundance, and never once used it to position herself. And then there's the endurance of it. To show up day after day to a job where you are largely invisible, where your full name lives in a drawer no one opens, where someone like Celia Ferrante can look through you like your furniture, and to keep going, not bitterly, not performing toughness, just continuing steadily because the work matters and the people matter, and that's enough. That is not a small thing. That is one of the hardest things there is. What happened to Celia was a consequence. Not punishment handed down by anyone, just the natural result of who she was colliding with, who Bea was. Celia operated on the assumption that power was about what you could take. Bea operated on the understanding that the most powerful thing you can offer anyone is your full, unhurried presence. Those two philosophies met in a room, and one of them held an old woman gently until her heartbeat slowed, and the other one left before midnight and didn't come back. Little Roman saw it. He saw all of it, and I don't think he fell for Bea because she was brave exactly. I think he recognized someone who had been doing the quiet, essential work of caring for people his whole life, and had been doing it alone, and suddenly understood what it felt like to be in a room with someone who could do it too. Until there's something that happened between them that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with truth. Two people being honest at the same time. No performance, no positioning. Just soup going cold on a kitchen table at 2 a.m, and the particular relief of not having to explain yourself to someone who already understands. That's what I take from Bea's story. Not the ending, the whole shape of it. The way a life built on small, consistent acts of genuine goodness eventually becomes something no one can ignore, no matter how hard they try.